Om yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasasaha ananda brahmana vidvan nabibeti kutas janeti. Om shantihi shantihi shantihi. That from which the mind and speech fall back in awe, unable to comprehend it. The one who realizes the bliss of that Brahman sheds doubt and fear forevermore. And so it is. Om peace, peace, peace. Om nityonityanam chetanas chetananam eko bahunam yo vidadati kaman tamatmastam yenupashanti dhiraha tesham shanti shashvati netaresham. Om shantihi shantihi shantihi. That one, the eternal among non-eternal things, the intelligence of the most intelligent ones, who though ever one, nevertheless fulfills the desires of the many. That one the realized ones see as dwelling in their own self. To them belong peace and to none else. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karvo Vahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvisho Vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, divine reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. And with those utterances, those profound divine slokas spoken out into the atmosphere here at the SRV Ashram in Portland, Oregon, where a few of us have gathered to look into the teachings of the Dharma, and we welcome the live streaming audience to our midst as well, from different parts of the country, as we seek to gather our forces and increase our devotion to Brahman, make our service to God more effective, God and mankind, and also increase our wisdom base, that knowledge which is within us, within the self already, we call knowledge or wisdom. We want to bring that out and hear it, shruti, and then roll it over in our minds, and do it in a group, and then do it individually afterwards too, and realize it in the end. That's called nididhyasana. And then bring it full circle back into our life, as Swami Vivekananda told us to do. And so we meet as a Sangha to look into great teachings like Upanishads. And on the Upanishadic star map, we are here right now. Of all of its different universes of wisdom, aspects of wisdom, there's the Akshi Upanishad there, which is part of the 51 Yajurveda, Krishna Yajurveda Upanishads. And there's the Mother Saraswati superimposed in back. As we look at that, you can see the Krishna Yajurveda has a couple, I think, if not more, of the major Upanishads in it, those 10 or 11 that Shankara commented on. You can see underlined there, the Katha Upanishad is in the company of the Akshi Upanishad, and so is the Taittiriya with all its wonderful teachings. And we've looked at those before and studied them as a group over the 25 or 30 years of studying together spiritual life. I'm in my 50th year now of dedicating myself to spiritual life. I started when I was 19, and I know that I remember when Lex Sixon, our founder, told me the same thing, that he had been studying in this lifetime alone for 50 years. And before that, of course, my teacher Swami Sheshananda went into his mid-90s, all the way from being, as a young man, being a monk, and spent spiritual life, spent his whole time in spiritual life, and came here west to continue to spread the Dharma teachings. And our new issue of Nectar of Non-Dual Truth, due out next month probably, has another transcribed article by Swami Sheshanandaji, a tape that we found. It's kind of rare. He's not just giving a discourse from the podium, but he was actually giving a little class like this in his own ashram to a few people on the Katha Upanishad, and talking about the method of it being the result of that, or the meaning of that, meaning we've come here to master death. Katha Upanishad, he said that was the meaning of Nachiketas going to the Lord of Death, Yama, and asking him what's beyond death. And so the Upanishads have that special facet, many of them, of having storylines in them, at the same time managing to maintain their non-dual strand. So you could say some qualified non-duality and some duality, or if you want to put it in that way, some smriti and some itihasa works its way into all the Upanishads. Also, you can see here the Yoga Kundalini Upanishad, which I've highlighted in my time of study, and we studied together on several retreats over the last couple of years. And then that first book of 5 small books that I put out in the last few years, called the Yoga Kundalini, I think Reclaiming Kundalini Yoga was the title of the book. And so there are, my point being, there are some strong connections between Vedanta and Tantra, as well as Vedanta and the secondary scriptures, Shruti and Smriti they call it. And also connections between Astika and Nastika, between Vedanta and, say, Buddhism, that you will see today, and as evidenced in some of the charts we'll study together. I want to bring up at least 1 or 2 charts and teachings out of the Tibetan Buddhist context, because I was initiated into that and took teachings into that for many years, and considering it one of my religious traditions that I have championed and practiced in. So that's where you are today with the Akshi Upanishad. And as far as in the Akshi Upanishad, and if any of you have not got your copy, I have some extra copies if you want printed out. But having already looked at that, excuse me here, bumped this. We have worked our way into the Brahmavidya part of this Upanishad. You know, the whole opening, if you remember, was the rishi repairing to the solar region. So he went meditating, he went inside to visit the sun god, Surya. And so we had a beautiful chart about Surya and what his powers are. And so there again, you see that in a non-dual scripture, there are these appearances of gods, goddesses, powerful beings that we look at as being within us, our own powers, power of fire, translating inside to intelligence, the light that illumines things, and Surya granting us our flood of days. We never really think about it, but the sun shines on us day after day, weeks, months, years, decades. And if you look at the many lifetime scenario, even centuries and lifetimes, that Surya provides that everlasting eternal light for us, that we can do our actions. Hopefully we do our actions in a conscious way and are able to extract some meaning out of this life. Otherwise, we know that life can be very vexing and very problematic, but with all the suffering. And we'll also look back on that in Sloka 13, as you remember. We looked back on the problem of suffering, and that's where we left off last time. But in order to reorient us, I want to just read the first 13 slokas, because that's how far we've come in the several meetings that we've had together in Oregon on this particular Upanishad. We've finished studying the Adhyatma Upanishad, and we looked into several other of the minor Upanishads that are strewn like jewels among across this star map of Vedic teachings, including the tantric aspects and yogic aspects of it too. So let me read for you, and you can just absorb these first 13 slokas in a few minutes. I'll start at the Brahmavidya part. The Chakshushmati Vidya you can look back on and see how the rishi, Samkriti is his name, went inside and into the solar region to find Surya first, thinking of him as his great ancestor, that he was an emanation of that. And that's thinking inward, it's not thinking backwards. Backwards means backwards in time, but time is just a linear line on a physical universe alone. Then you have to think back to the eternal, to the ancestors and beyond, to those beings that live all the time in their eternal nature, especially the realized souls, the seers who are eternal. And they're only appearing occasionally along that line of physical, and provided by a solar light from the sun too. But you have to look to the deeper meanings of these elements, like you would in Samkhya, the 5 elements, how they figure in your dream state, as Father of Yoga says, and what they translate to in terms of your subtle body, not just your physical body. So your spiritual ashram is always looking within to find this deeper meaning and meditate on it, because it's one of the debilitating aspects of Maya and of life, that if you fall into the hypnotism, the allurements of the outer only, and the senses going outwardly, as the Mundaka Upanishad says, then you become habituated to that, and you think in that way only, and you forget your true nature. And it's a lulling to sleep of your higher consciousness, and you want to always remain on vigil and aware and conscious and alert. And then, of course, move about the world, as Sri Ramakrishna was just saying to us before the live streaming audience joined us, when we read from the Gospel at the beginning of class about how to keep oneself poised in action and inaction both, to balance those things, like a breath, like you'd balance your breath. And your consciousness is a kind of breath, so it needs to be balanced too. It has a birth, a life, and a death every few seconds, if you want to put it that way. So if you're aware of your breath, which they want you to be, one of the earliest exercises, pranayama, then a japa, they call it. You breathe every day, in and out 400,000 times or so, and at night 200,000 times. So a japa would mean that every breath is saying hamsa, 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 or saham, 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 in different traditions. So you're always saying the name of the Lord with every breath in Sanskrit. So to become aware of that even a little would be very profound. So watching your breath is not just an exercise to render a restless mind peaceful, but it's actually got a very profound meaning to it on the level of practice, and even beyond practice on the level of I am, saham, I am, this self is. You always, it's not just a matter of denying delusion and trying to escape suffering and death. It's a matter of affirming your eternal life. So that's the one shift that you make out of goal-oriented practice, because at first you're driven by this vision of the ocean of suffering, to keep your nose above it, above the water. But then you realize that it's an art to keep yourself balanced, like the breath. This vigil that you're on then is always a matter of an intelligence that's permanent in you, and those who are able to naturally be buoyant, as Sri Ramakrishna said, like a hot air balloon, always moving up instead of rain water always falling down. They make an art form of this, and it becomes a very good habit as opposed to a very negative habit of always being depressed and brooding. We were in the prisons in the last few days, again visiting some of the inmate populations in these prisons we go to and share the Vedanta with, and again the teaching of escaping brooding mind was very effective for some people. Just to even hear that you could do that, as if brooding mind has become sort of a natural habit for most people. There is a kind of brooding that's not so negative. It's, you might say, like a mother bird sitting on her egg and waiting patiently, has a lot of time on her hands, as it were. So there is a kind of place you can be in, but the kind of brooding that's heavy and morose, and as we would say in our language, our spiritual language, tamasic, a Sanskrit word for heavy or slothful, that needs to be destroyed. As I just chanted, yata vacho nivartante, yata vakta, speech. Your speech, your thoughts have to be in line with one another. Vivekananda said, you can go anywhere and join any group you want. And I really have no problem with that whatsoever. But I found as I go around the world that only in Ramakrishna's family are thought, word, and deed not at variance. So you must allow me this one bit of narrowness, he said, that in Sri Ramakrishna's family he's found that there has been no angularities or rough edges in thought, word, and deed. Everyone there is on the same page, and in religious and spiritual terms, and there's no hypocrisy going on, and there's honesty and integrity and study of truth in the Dharma and so forth, and making no bones about it, kind of thing. So all of that is a kind of evenness and balance that we strive for in our lives, and here in the West it's more imperative that we do, because of what we're up against here in terms of hypnotism, allurement, enticements, and going against the grain of the flow of many, many worldly thinking, materialistic minds. It's difficult to keep your balance, and you have to go along the stream of Kaivalya, not the stream of samsara. That's one of the most ancient teachings in India from Lord Kapila. Samsara pragbara or Kaivalya pragbara. Pragbara means a dam, so if there's a tendency to go towards samsara, you must dam up that stream. And go along the stream then of Kaivalya towards freedom. So that's a directive, and even more than just a responsibility to us, to our families, our children, and as examples to others, if they want or when they want to get out of the ocean of suffering. Suffering can mean pleasure too. So good, I got that all out of me before I started reading, so I don't have to break the slokas. So let me read you these 13 slokas. Verily, Sankriti, the rishi, said to the sun, teach me Brahmagyan, teach me Brahmavid. The sun told him, listen then, Sankriti, I shall set forth the knowledge of reality that is so hard to come by, by which knowledge alone you will become liberated while living in the body, Jivan Mukta. Second sloka. All is one, unborn, tranquil, endless, certain, immutable. See reality as spirit, then be tranquil and at ease. Sloka 3. The adepts know yoga to be the non-knowing of plurality, the spontaneous attrition of the object-seeking mind. Rooted in yoga, perform actions, or, adverse to actions, perform them not at all. Sloka 4. For aversion is felt every day to inborn tendencies to act. Nevertheless, one plunges into noble actions with gusto. Slokas 5 and 6. Always one hesitates as regard to instinctive actives of the unregenerate, but one never refers to what may compromise others, but attends on their righteous deeds only. One does gentle deeds that pain none, always dreads sin and avoids all forms of self-gratification. Sloka 7. Such a one's speech is informed by affection and love. It is lovely and fit, with due regard to time and place. Sloka 8. With proper thought, act, and speech, one waits upon the virtuous. Getting them from all conceivable sources, one then studies the Shastras from them. Slokas 9 and 10. Then one attains the first state of yoga. I point to the chart here. First state of yoga. We have these 7 states of yoga that the Akshi Upanishad teaches. One then attains to the first stage of yoga. Whoever entertains such thoughts as regards to crossing transmigratory life is said to have attained a state of yoga. The rest are said to be just noble. Sloka 10 and 11. Coming to the next state of yoga, called analysis or vichara, the sadhaka refers to the foremost scholars, well known for their serious interpretations of Shruti and Smriti, for their good conduct, for their fixed attentions, for their contemplation and their right activities. Sloka 12. As a householder knows his homestead, so, having mastered all that has to be learned, the sadhaka comes to know the categories, the doctrines, vis-a-vis what has to be done and what has to be avoided. Sloka 13. As a snake sheds its slough, so sheds he even the slight attachment to external objects when they are intensified by pride, conceit, intolerance, greed, and delusion. And then today's sloka that we will take up. With a mind disciplined through devotion to the Shastras, devotion to the teacher, and the company of the virtuous, that one truthfully masters the entire body of knowledge, including even the secret doctrines. Just as a lover repairs to a spotless bed of flowers, from the second stage, he, the sadhaka, proceeds to the third state, styled non-attachment. So in those first 15 slokas, actually, 2 of which we take today, the first 3 levels of yoga are placed. So another numbered system that we're not so familiar with in the West comes from this minor Upanishad that hasn't really been studied much in the West, or even in the world today in contemporary times. One of the reasons when I go through the 108 Upanishads, when I look for Upanishads that are fit and right for us to study, not only because of their staying close to the teachings of our Ishtams, Swami Vivekananda, but also that they're not too long and too esoteric, because some of them get very esoteric and we don't really have in the West today much wherewithal to understand some of the more esoteric teachings. But esoteric is one thing, direct and profound is another, and you can see that there's nothing really untoward or hard to comprehend in these first 13 slokas. the message comes across pretty clear, and we've taken some 15 charts or so I've got written here on the margins of my copy of the scripture. In these first 15 slokas, we've taken at least a chart, the dharma chart I call them, to look at every one of these and pull them apart and try and see deeper into them. So let's go deeper. Let's look at these first three stages of yoga, of the seven, because we know there's eight-limbed yoga of Patanjali, and we know there's 7 qualifications and victories in Tantra, and we know there are a whole host of different numbered systems, and here another one comes forward to us that without a lot of excess verbiage and even maybe a lot of detail about qualification that we need to have to become a Vedantist or to pursue Vedic lore and wisdom. We see that it's pretty much straightforward, that the first stages of yoga are evinced in these first 13 slokas, really. So if you didn't hear it specifically go by listed as stage 1, the first stage, I've looked it up in other sources, it's just called yoga. So it's a very wonderful, I think it's one of my favorite slokas so far, is about how if one comes to transcend transmigratory life, then one's set their foot on the path of yoga. You can call yourself not just noble, because there are noble people out there who are doing heroic acts and so forth, and maybe a lot of them are doing noble acts thinking the world is real and that they're making some real impression on it, but it just goes on and produces more noble people and also more evil people to fight the constant battle of good and evil going on, and people get really caught up in that. Not just in deluded ways, like say maybe military ways, and all of the karma that leads to bad relations between people, when peace should always be, peace and tolerance at least should always be the ground we stand on. But since evil is making such an appearance, then there are a cross-section of people who do have to rise up and protect, and those are called virya. But there are probably beings who are virya in a spiritual sense, who would protect the dharma and who would protect families and neighbors and so forth from the encroachment of text torturing and things that are enemies to us, to our spiritual health. But then there is also arya, saying here, or beings who are virya, who try and protect physically, and they're going to have to use force, and they're not going to be following necessarily the tenets of ahimsa and yoga and so forth, so they haven't really entered onto the path. So first stage of yoga, if you want to assess yourself in that, would be this ability to, as 9 and 10 says, you attain to the first stage of yoga when you entertain thoughts regarding the crossing of transmigratory life. So it's very simple, but very subtle too. Do you think, and do you sit around and think, or do many people sit around and think, gee, I think I don't like it here anymore? They're like Jesus said, and I was talking to a Christian chaplain about this in a prison a couple evenings ago, because he made a very stunning statement to me. He said, oh, well, the Christianity is dead today. And this was a Christian chaplain talking to me. He said, people aren't going to it anymore. It's got to change its face and present a better face. So transmigratory life is, Jesus said that. He said, those who love their life will lose their life, and those who hate their life will get it again in eternity. So he was going amongst the people of the time and the fallen Judaism and the Romans on the scene, and at a time 2,000 years hence before that we've noted, and it's in our history, and looking at people and seeing that they needed to get eternal life, even those who were noble, like the fishermen along the river, or those who were would like to be noble, but the Romans had forced them into being tax collectors. And some of his disciples were fishermen, some were tax collectors. One was very astute philosopher in a college. So he was going amongst these people and seeing that they were noble, but they were forced into worldly means, and he wanted to make them fishers of men. So, and there was no such thing as Christianity at the time. So it wasn't like you had the Christian moral code or anything. You still had the Ten Commandments there that had to be interpreted in the right way. So to make people aware that they have to be perfect as thy Father in heaven is perfect would be no different than today when we go around and say, well, you have the Atman inside of you. You may be in prison. You may be following a failed religion or a failed Christianity. But are you still noble? Are you still seeking? And so, are you trying to get back into yoga, which is union, because you know you've fallen out? Because many people don't feel like they've fallen out of anything. They feel like life is yoga, but worldly life can never be one with God. Otherwise, you wouldn't need to separate the wheat from the chaff. So, put very nicely here by the sun god, to Sankriti, in a very early time, whoever entertains such thoughts as regards the crossing of transmigratory life is said to be having attained a state of yoga, first state of yoga, first stage. So as I said, I proposed my question, do you sit around thinking, I need to transcend this life? And we're not to think, because you see, early on he said, see reality as tranquil and peaceful and ease, even if you're in the body, jivan mukta. See, so we can't jump to say, well, I hate my life. I want to get it again in eternity, so I think I'll die. Then you'd be falling into the misfiance that the soul is born and the soul dies, which is not the case in our tradition. The soul is eternal. It can't be created. It can't be destroyed. So you're going to have to shift away from living with death to living with eternal life, because now you're living with death. Yama is your constant companion. Yama is not only your companion, historically speaking, and because you're facing off with cancer and various diseases and so forth, but you're also thinking about death, particularly when you're old, that my time has come to an end and so forth. So you're thinking wrongly. You don't have the right, you've never had the right thoughts in your head about being an eternal soul. You've never lived in a non-dual state. You've never met a person who exemplified how to live in a non-dual state, like Swami Sheshananda did for us here in Portland for 40 years. And so until you saw that and came to grips with it, and then became very certain of it, tranquil, endless, certain, immutable, that you are unborn, and you get into an agreement about that with the seers, then you haven't even entered the first stage of union with God yet. So that would be how I'd interpret the main message of these first 13 slokas, if you want to apply them to the first stage of yoga. Now when it gets to the second stage of yoga, called analysis or vichara, means it's not going to be enough for you just to say, okay, I'm down with that. I don't really like my life. I see the suffering here, and I see that I feel incomplete all the time, and I'm imperfect, and so forth and so on. And you're seeing the limitations of life and existence, and of the body-mind mechanism, as we say in Vedanta, and of the ego, and how it changes faces on you all the time, and how your friends have fair faces and false hearts back and forth. You're seeing all of that, and so you've come to some sort of agreement with it, but now it's not enough for me just to affirm, because Swami Sheshananda, whom I just mentioned here in Portland, told us that affirmation is just the beginning, and then there has to be confirmation. And this is all leading towards a mature renunciation that will turn you from someone who loves the unreal to someone who loves eternal life, who lives in eternal life. And nothing will have changed in your body, in your location, when that happens. So maybe you might be visiting the holy company then instead of visiting the company of the worldly. But no real change has taken place as far as life and death goes in you when you make this transition. Your inner life is what you're beginning to bring forth, or you're moving back into inner life and making it more important than your outer life. Your outer life, you just move like an automaton, they say, and which doesn't mean callous and unawares, but the shift of your attention to the most important things, the most essential things, is happening in you. And that will have a mark on the outer world too. The Upanishad gets into that. So that's a stage of analysis. You see the person becomes more speculative. And it says here in slokas 10 and 11, you resort to the foremost teachers, well known for their interpretations of Shruti and Smriti. And it says, the word used here in this translation, which isn't all that good, is foremost scholars. So we would think, oh, then I should go to college and get a degree. Let's go back to college. But we learned from intellectual people, and that they were coming from an intellectual frame of reference only. But we really didn't go to a teacher or a guru who majors in spiritual life, who will give you a badge of authority rather than some piece of paper with some scrawl on it, and will then make you, allow you to help to join the lovers of Brahman together. You must follow the teachers and the gurus of spiritual life until you realize Brahman, and then you may join their company. So in that stage, you're talking about number 2, vichara, bhumika. Bhumika is a ground. So the next ground you reach, the next stage you reach, the next level you reached, is that now you're analyzing. And I would say, like, na asatya vidyate bhavo nabhavo vidyate sattaha, as Krishna says in the Gita. The unreal never exists, and the real never ceases to be. So ubayor api drishantos, I see, the seers now see both of them. So it's not like they left off of unreality and concluded that it's not important anymore. They did conclude that it wasn't real, but it's not yet to the state where you can just live in the 7th stage, say, where your mind is completely floating free of all things. They're beginning to describe that already. You're at a state where you need to keep in mind that samsara is still a threat to you, and other people around you are living in it as if it were real, and that poses you a very hard problem. See, that again, like I said at the beginning of class, you don't want to be sucked into that stream towards samsara. It's so natural, seeming natural to go that direction. Pleasure with objects, materials, and selfish grasping, and all the things that are mentioned here in Sloka 13. You should shed even the slightest attachment to external objects. Then he qualifies it, when they are intensified by pride, conceit, intolerant greed, and delusion. But so that leaves the door open there. Do I have to gain detachment from external objects when they're not attended by those things? I can be indifferent to them, and I can even utilize them. See? So that's a teaching that's leading you more towards a mature detachment from things, which is going to happen at the 3rd stage. Achieves non-attachment. So a more mature non-attachment is coming to you, but you do definitely need to cut yourself off from external objects that are attended by any kind of pride, like pride in wealth and pride in family and pride in children, and any kind of conceit that you have around it, any kind of intolerance that it's bred in you, and greed and delusion. And those charts we ended up with last time I showed you, I can show you again. But in this 13 sloka analysis here. We are right now at sloka 2. Study with acharyas and gurus. That's a new facet for most people's lives. I meet them every week. I meet people like that. A couple days ago, a Christian woman came to me, said, and I wanted to get into yoga. The head of my church said, as Christians, we don't do that. That's not allowed. That's evil. So we just stay, to our devotion to Christ, and that's it. But she said, but I didn't feel in my stomach that that was the right thing to do. I feel like I want to go beyond what I'm being taught right now in that particular church, which, as far as we know, is one of the churches or is a part of that fallen Christianity that even Christians are admitting to today. Christians who have what? Who have the power to analyze. See, they've stepped back a little bit. They don't have any problem. Christ is their ideal and their Savior, and that's all well and good that it should be. But they know that the teachings around are not being held high. It's not even noble to be entertaining some of these teachings. I mean, isn't it right there? Sober-minded men have become disgusted with their superstitious religions. Vivekananda said. Yeah, he's talking about Western Christians and Jews that he met here when he came. And they're looking to India for more light. I can almost quote it verbatim, but basically he's saying the idea of a creation out of nothing, that's just ridiculous. There's always something. There's never nothing. There's seeds. And when this is gone, there's dream. And when waking and dreaming are gone, there's deep sleep. And there's always something there that's bringing you back out of formlessness into form and then taking you back to formlessness again. And giving you the desire for jivan mukta. I want to be free, which is based on the fact that transmigratory life has to be renounced and Maya has to be transcended. So all those things are always there. There's something. If they're not in the physical, they're in the mental body. And when they're not in the mental body, they've gone back to seeds. So the idea of creation out of nothing does not make sense to us, sorry. Neither does a big God sitting on a cloud on a throne in heaven make sense to us. Neither does eternal flames, eternal hell and damnation make sense to us, you see. So a good quote to put there along with the 108 Upanishads, whose message is exactly opposite of that something always is, that existence is. The best two-letter mantra in English you can have is existence is, or I am, if you want to put it that way. And nobody says I'm not. Not even people who are lost in Maya say I'm not. They may have a wrong premise to be declaring their existence on, but they say I am. Right now I am in the world, I am in the body, I am the ego, I am active, I am rich, or I am suffering. That mantra applies across the board to everyone, deluded or enlightened. So it's just not even in the vocabulary, you might say, or in the thought vocabulary that you can get something out of nothing. It just doesn't make any sense. So then you will enter into a state of analysis based on wanting to get beyond transmigratory life. But I hope I'm not kicking a dead horse, but I am re-emphasizing it again and again that according to this teaching that the Sun God gave to Samkriti, and I just said the same thing about Swami Sheshananda giving the message of you're here to transcend death in the Katha Upanishad. That's the same thing they're saying here, thousands of years apart. Here it's put that if you entertain thoughts of getting out of transmigratory life, then you hate your life. You don't love your life anymore. And other people are in love with their life, with the life of loving the world, loving unreal things. And that's why in Vedanta we say there is no spiritual life without viveka. That's the first thing you get as a gift from your teacher is the discrimination between the real and the unreal. And there's so many people who are professing to be spiritual, professing to be religious, professing to be Buddhists, professing to be Hindus, professing to be Jews, and so forth and so on. who are not living up to that criterion. They are loving the world. And you must love the Lord thy God first and foremost. You must put the one in front of the zeros. However you want to express that, it's based in viveka. And that viveka is then telling you transmigratory life has to go. The idea that there's a God on a throne sitting somewhere, and then below me there's hell, fires, and damnation has to go. The idea that my soul was ever created and then gets destroyed has to go. And so you're very adamant about that, and you want to analyze it. Basically, enough said, I think. So when you analyze it, that's in Sloka 9 and 10, you've attained the second state of yoga. And then in 11 it says, you attend upon these foremost, I would say, luminaries, known for their serious interpretation of Smriti and Shruti. Well, Shruti is what has to be heard. Smriti is secondary, what comes after that. Or you might say in most people's life, Smriti will come first and Shruti will come later. Though, like even many of the Indians and Hindus and so forth, they'll be exposed to the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. They'll have devotion increasing to God with form. They won't have non-duality yet in the scope of things. But pretty soon they'll find out that these beings that they're so in love with, Christ, Buddha, Krishna, and so forth, they wanted to go higher than their own station. They had a doorway into the Almighty Father, into Brahman. They got Jivan Mukta. They went beyond duality. And so if they did, then we should also follow. Be a lamp unto thyself and light that way for yourself. So sometimes Smriti will come first, and sometimes Shruti will come first. In beings, you see that pretty much are born, as Sri Ramakrishna was telling us in the Gospel before we started class again. He said some beings are nitya siddha. They just come straight into life, and they already have the non-dual truth, and they just continue spreading it to others. Other people's are kripa siddha. They come in and they get grace along the way sometimes. See, they're like a door. They're like a room that's been kept dark 1,000 years or 100 years. And all of a sudden a lamp's brought in. Those are the kripa siddhas. So siddha means perfection. So there are different kinds of people courting different kinds of perfection out there according to their abilities. And it is based upon transmigratory life. How? Because you went beyond your past lifetime too to get to this one. See? And hopefully you brought something with you from your last lifetime when you came into this one in the terms of Smriti. See? But now Shruti is coming forward to you. So you have this opportunity to hear non-dual truth and become one with the Father and say Aham Brahmasmi and so forth, the great Mahavakyas, you see, and take them seriously, analyze them, and realize them. So basically it's kind of saying here what I said at the beginning of class. First, you could say Smriti, Shruti, and so forth, but you could also say Shravana and Manana. First you hear it, then you roll it over in your mind, isn't it? And then you realize it, the third stage. And here later on, I don't think I can find it really quickly, but yeah, among these, and this is skipping ahead to 29, among those, the all-pervading third stage is superior. Here the sadhaka has outgrown all proneness to imagine and get ensnared in conceptions. The first stage is internal, cleansed, the birthplace of the other stages. Then one attains the second and third stages, but amongst these, the third stage is superior. So you get cleansed in the first stage. Cleansed of what? Of the idea that you're transmigrating, or that the world is real. And so that's the desire for yoga. You want to be back in union with yourself. You want your breath to flow evenly again. You want your food to be digested pure, in a pure state. Everything all of a sudden has to change. You see that in people all the time. And I said, I'm in my 50th year of dedication to this now, and 19 So when I was 19, I remember it. Immediate vegetarianism as soon as I left the family. Immediately started studying Shankara. Immediately, everything changed for me. It was just like that, as if I had paid a debt to society and family, and I was free. So the first stage for me in this lifetime, if you want to say that, then was yoga. I wanted to be back in union, and I had, in a Western society and Western upbringing, and I had escaped having to go to the army and going to Vietnam because I was a musician and I had a student deferment, and my lottery number was drawn 280 something, 365 days, right? So if you were a young man at that time, Vietnam, then they were drawing numbers out of a hat for you, see, and everyone was sitting around in college listening to the radio those days, you see. Oh, they're reading out the numbers now. Are we going to go to war and get killed, have to fight, use violence, or do we get to stay back and just study and play music and live our lives? So I remember hearing my birthday, in January, being drawn 280 something. I already had a student deferment, so I had some grounds for saying no to that kind of nonsense. But those are the things that are the threat to your early life, and of course that plays right into transmigratory life. You create some scars for violence, and you create some scars for killing, and create some scars for listening to higher authority. You should never listen to higher authority. I heard a Tibetan Buddhist say that, a teacher say that. There's 3 things you should avoid. First thing is listening to higher authorities. So, of course, he was a higher authority, and I was listening to him, telling me not to listen to higher authorities. So you do the math. You listen to those people who have, compassion and who have a sincere desire for you to get free. Those you can listen to. But if they're trying to route you into these systems of Maya, then you have to be very careful. And so I'm saying, from a past lifetime, you've brought in this ability to be more discerning. These are stages in this lifetime, but some of them have been accomplished before by you in other lifetimes, and you're just re-accomplishing them. So you can't let Maya fool you that way by thinking that just because Swami Vivekananda almost had to get a job, because his father died and he had to support his family, then all of a sudden Sri Ramakrishna freed him of that, and he just went on with his intended destiny, if you could say, that he was a Nityasiddha all the time. But you wouldn't call a Nityasiddha someone who had to get a job necessarily, spiritually speaking. So then you'd be very foolish to conclude that he wasn't a Nityasiddha just because he had to relive in that lifetime, for our sake, the way to get out of Maya. You're not going to come here and speak from a high platform and not evince or exemplify how it is to get out of Maya. They're doing it for our sake. So if you thought like Jesus died on the cross, then of course that's the wrong thinking. He was never born to begin with. The soul is never born. It can't die because it was never born. So I'm engaging you right now in stage 2, you see. This is some analysis that has gone through my mind for 50 years. And you think about it, and you think about it, and you think about it. You essay, and you conclude, and you conclude, and you conclude. And this is the way in which the final nails get hammered into the coffin of fundamentalism and duality and so forth. But it's also a way in which new doorways get open to you each lifetime that you can improve yourself. That's called krama mukti. You are gaining liberation by stages. But isn't this also a kind of stage? But you can do these stages all in one life, and should. You should relive them every lifetime that you take. Even if you reach the highest perfection and you decide to come and take another lifetime in freedom, you can still relive those. I mean, those are part of your attributes then. They weren't a part of your attributes before, they were foggy and clouded, and like the first 19 years of my life. See, but then all of a sudden the opening comes, and you remember everything, smriti, and it's up to you then to make that memory valid, not just leave it floating in some sort of, oh, maybe it's true, maybe it isn't. So the analysis is very important in Vedanta. Atma vichara. That's in Advaita Vedanta, that you're analyzing and finding that you're one with Brahman. But here, it's not quite that yet. You've just gotten into yoga and you're following stage by stage. And you can do this whether you're a householder or a merchant or a businessman or a monk or a vanaprasthan, a forest dweller. These are stages that are all available to you because spiritual life opens all the doorways for you in that way. And you should walk through some of them. See what's on the other side. Knock and it should be opened is a great teaching by Jesus. And so he says, so a householder knows his homestead. Having mastered all that has to be learned, the sadhaka comes to know of the categories and the doctrines. I wasn't going to bring out Samkhya's 24 Cosmic Principles warhorse chart again, but I've got it listed here next, and underlined next to that word, categories. The minute we hear categories in English, we think tattvas in Sanskrit. And the minute we think tattvas in Sanskrit, we think about sets of fives by which the soul comes out and moves back in. Fivefold mind, to the five subtle senses, to the five subtle elements, to the five gross elements, to the five gross senses. I had to run it all back to the inmates in prison 3 evenings ago, saying, well, this is how you got here, and this is how you get back. And next week at our retreat in Bridal Veil nearby, where we're taking up manasana, they're in the very first healing postures you take up is Adividya Daivasana. I remember the original wisdom. This is the original wisdom of all time, not of one religion or one philosophy. It's the actual way in which the soul moves from tattva to tattva. And the seers remember her and know her as the abiding principle in all things. She's the secret in all the mantras. She's the meaning of all words. And her essence is non-duality, the Tantras say. That's Mother Wisdom. That's Saraswati. See? She's the Vakdevi, the mother of all the words. So Buddha said the same thing, and I repeated it in a class last week in San Francisco, if you were watching live stream. He said, become aware and become masterful of all the categories and of all the teachings. So here, the sun god is saying the same thing to Sankriti. The sadhaka has to come to know all the categories and all the doctrines, and therefore know what has to be done and what has to be avoided. So again, why I quoted, the unreal never is, the real never ceases to be. The truth about both has been known by the seers. So at this stage, you're very cautious still of samsara's insinuations, see, because maybe you've gotten out of transmigratory life by thinking, I'm going to get free in this lifetime. That's my main directive. I want to be free. But there's still possibilities for becoming bound, and for the wise falling back into a sort of pat ignorance, you see, a sort of default zone that isn't necessarily copacetic with the highest realization of the seers, those beings who are always illumined. So therefore, in this stage, the sadhaka resorts to foremost scholars well known for their serious interpretations of the Shruti, who said what about non-duality. So go to Shankar and find out what he said about the categories, why they were unreal. Because somebody said to me just yesterday that, I've seen some of the people that have been studying with you for a long time, they're still not quite sure about this, you see, about these certain things. and the categories are some of them, you see. So they have to become certain of that by constant analysis over time. And so maybe people in India weren't all that clear after the first wave of Buddhism fell, and Shankara came along to bring back the Advaita Vedanta and established the 4 cardinal places in India and so forth in 700 AD. Maybe they were still thinking, what was that unreal again? You see, what was it we had to watch out for? Because so much water went by under the bridge of your witness consciousness that you got hypnotized by the water and forgot that you were on the bridge. You were looking on the water going by, but you identified with the water and all the glimmers, and you got pulled upstream or downstream with it. So what was the real and the unreal? So therefore, in Shankara's put it in the Vivekachudamani, which I read at 20 years of age. So everything from the Avyaktam all the way down to the element earth. That's the unreal. And that was some 24 things, see, that were told by copious so early on. Adi Vidya Daiva. Adi, original, Vidya, wisdom, divine. The original divine wisdom was told by him. And now, Samkriti, I'm telling it to you. See? Because in this age, people have forgotten. And then again, in the next age, people have forgotten. And then in Shankara's age, people have forgotten. Then in Vivekananda's age, people have forgotten. And so you remind them over and over again, what's the unreal and what's the real? What's the wheat and what's the chaff? What's Purusha? What's Prakriti? What's the self? What's the non-self? You have to analyze. Analyze means remember. Remember means go back and remind, you see. Remind the mind of what's unreal, so that you will give up transmigratory existence once and for all and be free. And when you're free, you can be Jivan Mukta. My teacher shouted that out at us. American people must get Jivan Mukta. You see, must give up the Bhoga Marga, path of pleasure. Two world wars are past, and others on the horizon. You better beware. See? So he was bringing these great teachings back to us all the time, every day, with every breath that he had, to try and impress it on us. And whether people come or whether they go in waves and so forth, that's to be expected. That article I just told you about in the Nectar that's coming out next month, Nectar of Non-Dual Truth, where I took that talk of Swami Sheshanandaji's on the Katha Upanishad and transcribed it. It's just one cassette was all I had of that, so I listened through it all and typed it all down. He started the whole thing out saying, well, my audience here today will diminish over the next few weeks. The first thing he said. So everyone had come to him and said, oh, were you teaching Upanishad? Were you teaching Upanishad? Oh, all right. You know, because just going to a once-a-week lecture, they wanted more. So sure, I'll do that for you. Very first talk on the Katha Upanishads. Well, I see you're all here, but this group will diminish over the next few weeks. And sure enough, you know, he had been through 40, 50 years of that already, of seeing people come and go. Americans who are straw on fire, as Vivekananda said. They want to hear, they want to learn, they want to hear. But then they won't go on to the analyzing stage. So they think that maybe, oh, I've heard, and since we see intellectual wisdom's enough for us. If I just understood that Nachiketas went to Yama and there was something beyond death, well, that's enough, you see. But they haven't actually realized and studied what Nachiketas was told by Yama and what Samkriti is being told by the Sun God in different ages. And they haven't spent time in it. You know, like Sri Ramakrishna saying, dip the cloth of your mind in the ocean of Satchidananda every day until it's saturated. Every day, saturated. Because at night it dries up and gets stiff, you see. Next morning you got to dip it in again to saturate it. So that ocean of Dharma teachings is there for that particular purpose. But have you pragbarred it off? Is it a stream you're not running along anymore? Oh, I think I'll take my mind away from that, not go see Swami Sheshananda teach the Katha Upanishad anymore. I just think I understood enough, and then damn that off, and then all of a sudden I'm back in the world with all its vagaries and vicissitudes and allurements, and then I'm living a nice life, thank you very much. I'm loving my life again. But those who love their life will lose their life. And those who hate their life will get it again in eternity. So you have to love a different kind of life, and then go on with your, if you're a householder, a merchant, businessman, go on with your life outside. But your fealty and your concentration and your love has all shifted back to the inner life. And if you studied the Advaita Vidya, you'd know that you need to shift back to knowing where the source of everything is, where the source of wisdom is, her, if you can find her. She's very hidden. But her teachings aren't that hidden yet. They're still coming forth. And the great souls like Vivekananda didn't come here and tell us, meditate on your crown chakra and poof, that's it. Sort of like a new age thing that people do. Pretend like they're free. He came here and he wrote back to people, they don't know anything here. They don't know about tanmatras. They don't know about their prana. They're attached to their bodies and their egos. They don't know about God. Quick, put the Yoga Sutras into some sort of transcribed Sanskrit and translated English and send them over to me. Quick, do the Upanishads, do the same with the Upanishads. Hurry, send these scriptures over. That was his way of bringing to us as swiftly as possible the wisdom of India, so that we can get it in one lifetime, because we need it. We need the Vidya Shastras, and we need to hear the Shruti, and the Smriti would help too. And in a place where Smriti, you don't have anything but Aesop's fables, or the cat jumped over the moon or something. You see what you were raised with. But they were raised with teachings on Ram, Sri Ram and Sri Krishna, and the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita. This is what the Vivekananda heard all his life when he was a boy. His mother read this to him, these stories. His father talked with him about them. So it was in the family, you see. It was an analysis going on internally and externally. So yeah, the external will get remade and transformed by the internal, but you have to shift to the internal to do it. Just like some Kriti is doing here. Is he going to ask the golden orb in the sky for wisdom? See, oh son, please tell me what you know. I've been sitting here for days, but I don't hear anything. See? He went inside to the source of the sun, called Surya, the living consciousness of the sun, and asked him then, you see. And then he got his answers. He went inside. He didn't look up. He looked in. He didn't look back. He looked in. If you're a fundamentalist member of Christianity that's forlorn and forsaken now and falling apart, you look up. If you're an intellectual person influenced by science, you look back. But you never look in. See? If you're a Vedantist and a Buddhist, you look in. See? If you're a Sufi, you look in. If you're a yogi, you look in. That's the most important thing. What are my dreams telling me? So that's in. Or the kingdom of heaven, where is it? It's in my dreams. I can get to the erasure of concepts later, you see, in the fourth stage. But right now I need to take up the concepts that are most worthy and look at them and hear them, Shruti, and roll them over in my mind. Next month in Hawaii we'll have that retreat on Shruti, Yukti, and Anubhava, or Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, the three proofs of truth and those kinds of things. We'll be looking at how to take a sutra and go off with it somewhere and take it apart and extract essence out of it. Not just intellectual acumen, but essence. Because, I'm speaking, there's some response in the room, hopefully in the people looking on the live streaming. So that's what it is, you see. I'm getting that in a direct transmission from someone who's speaking always about this subject. So I'm understanding the meaning of the words, but the inspiration it's giving you is not coming from the meaning of the words. It's coming from your knowledge of truth. See? I've taken you and shifted you back to the truth loka. Now you're in the atmosphere of the truth loka. And now the words mean something more to you, see. And when you go off, you need to take that back home and so forth, and ponder them and think about them. Like some of my students drive around, listening to the recordings of these classes and so forth, so that they can experiment with how long can God exist in the world. See, how long can this dharma go? Can it last 12 hours or 8 hours or 6 hours, or does it only last in my morning meditation, and then when I get to work it's pragbara time, you see, dammed off, and then I have to kind of go and like redig the dam tonight when I go back to meditation again, or pick up the scripture next weekend, or hear Babaji talk in 2 months again. Is it always flowing and open to me? Knocking, it should be opened. Not knocking, it should be open, and then it closes again 2 hours later. Knocking, it shall stay open. See? So we have then looked at that. Now I wanted to draw attention to this chart and its quotes, because that's something we haven't really talked about yet. So first quote here: by cultivating this sequence of stages, a superior non-attachment in the case of a magnanimous seeker supervenes. So he's beginning to talk about a kind of a non-attachment that wasn't necessarily there in the first two stages. It was in its development. It is said to be silent, reposed, and quiescent, for speech and import have been entirely cast off in the light of the truth. Which is why I started out chanting today, Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha. The mind, manasa, and vacha, speech, fall back when it hears about Brahman. And you've shifted again from the outer world where you were when you walked in here, and then you've shifted straight to the inner world. And you didn't have to make the effort. I made the effort. I started talking, you shifted. Now you have to go home and make the effort yourself, for yourself. And you have to do it over and over again until you can do it for yourself, and this is how you light your torch, and this is how you become a lamp unto yourself. And then come and say goodbye to me, if you want. Not before. Before it's betrayal, see. You betrayed the mantra, you betrayed the teachings, you betrayed the guru, you betrayed the sangha. But if you come to me and say, I understood, I've lit my lamp. Salutations, see, go with Brahman. That's the whole point of it all. But don't have a premature attitude about it. See, are you silent? Are you reposed? Are you quiescent all the time? Are you balanced all the time? Are you in yoga all the time? Or are you falling out of this first stage, back and forth? Knock and it should be open. Don't knock and it closes. No, it should stay open all the time. And what is the import of that? I am no agent at all. The agent is God. Or my own prior actions. I like that very much, and it's very hard to understand, but he's giving you two options there. Your default zone for being quiescent and peaceful and all that has to be one of two things. I am no agent, or my own karma is the agent. See? For the practical person, he'll say, well, I still have my karma operating, and I can't really say that God does everything yet. See? Shakale tomari ichya. Oh Lord, you do everything, I do nothing. That's a very high standpoint to get to and be truthful, because maybe tomorrow you'll think I'm doing it. God isn't actually doing it at all. That only occurred to me for one day or for a couple hours. Oh yes, God's doing everything, you see. But then all of a sudden I become very filled with self-arrogating thought, see, like the Buddhists say. See, I'm doing it now, I'm doing it. And then I get a bad result. Oh, yeah, God did that. Or something good happens to me. See, I did it. See? So the ego is waffling around and shifting, shape-shifting in your side of your mind, you see. So then why don't you just admit it? The karma is my agent. And because if you have that advantage of looking at your karma as being the agent in your life, then you will give up punya, give up papa and go to punya. No more non-meritorious action to me, but just meritorious action. How is that put? One always hesitates as regards to instinctive actions of the unregenerate. One never refers to what may compromise others, but always attends on righteous deeds. One does gentle deeds that pain no one, always dreads and avoids all forms of self-gratification. So that's how that looks. And so why I put this sloka from later out front here in the chart. Basically, I am no agent at all. The agent is God. That's the best if you can realize that level. Otherwise, or it's just my own prior actions that's bringing this upon me. Either way, you're the witness, and you're at a greater advantage over the ego and the ego of others when you put it this way. And I was thinking, Shankara concurs with that. For instance, he will sing something like this: Nacha prana sango navai pancha vayu navasapta dhatu nava pancha koshaha Navakpani padam nacha pastapayu Chidananda rupaha Shivoham Shivoham I am neither the life force flowing, nor am I the 5 vital breaths. Neither the 7 elements of the body, nor the 5 sheaths. Nor hands, nor feet, nor tongue, nor any act or action, nor any of the organs of sex or voiding. Rather, I am pure consciousness and bliss. I'm Shiva. I'm Shiva. So he has this attitude, you see, about that. It's ultimately the Lord does everything, because I'm not the prana, which is what does things. And I'm not the organs of sex and voiding, which by people do things. They eat, they excrete, they procreate. And in all those acts they're thinking, I am doing. And but you're not the 5 sheaths, then all of those things that are going on, the prana in the 5 sheaths, is not you either. So you're convincing yourself, and he's affirming for you here, that hands and feet are the Lord's. He's leading you toward this highest realization. The Lord's means what? 5. Your hands have 5, your feet have 5 toes, you have 5 senses, there are 5 vital breaths going on. See, he's leading you toward this higher realization, stage by stage, that you've come from the source that is beyond all sets of 5s, from the avyaktam all the way down to the element earth. That is 5 elements: ether, air, fire, water, and earth. That's all the non-self. That's all the unreal. And I am the self and all. I am Shiva. I am Shiva. See? So whether you put it in terms of the sun god teaching Samkriti in a very early time, in 7 stages of yoga, or whether you put it in the 6 stages of nirvana by Shankara in 700 AD, it all translates about to the same final conclusion. In this way, Surya Narayan, the sun god, is giving him the 2 perspectives that the enlightened come up with. So they conclude, I am no agent. That would be Sri Ramakrishna to a T. Mother does everything, I am no agent. But there is this prarabdha karma, you see, that I'm still dealing with. And that's to them is a doorway into non-agency. That's a door. To others, it's a permission to be everything that's not real, to engage in everything that's filled with pleasure and pain, life and death, and love my life instead of hate my life and get it again in eternal life. So we'll look at the slokas 14 and 15 with a new chart, and these 2 were the opening charts, and oriented this nice to the first of the 3 stages. We are at the 3rd stage here when we come back from our break. So here, let's take 15 minutes.